Cool. Well, I think we probably get started. I will kick off just by introducing myself. So thanks everyone for joining our March customer webinar. For those who I don't work with directly, my name's George. I'm a customer success manager at Go1. Lovely to meet you all, and hello to all of the customers that I work with on a really regular basis. Thanks very much everyone for attending. We last hosted a webinar like this back in December, and we reflected on 2020 with a view to showcase how to best optimize ROI from Go1. And thanks to the positive feedback from that webinar, and most notably a desire throughout our customer community to run them more regularly, we're all here today. And it's great to see so many of the same people and so many new people able to attend. To start with, I'll just begin with a couple of housekeeping items. So the first is that this webinar is being recorded, and we will send out the recording via a link afterwards. So if you do want to share that internally with any colleagues that couldn't make it today, please do feel free to do so. Secondly, we'll be running several polls throughout the session. It would be amazing for as many of you to answer these polls as possible. They're really, really helpful for us to determine the future direction of Go1's product and our customer community. And lastly, we will be inviting comments and questions through both the chat and the Q&A functions. I think a couple of you have found that already. So please do chuck any questions that you have in there, but as to not disrupt the flow of the speakers, I'll either ask questions at the end of their presentations, or hopefully we'll have the time at the end for more general Q&A. So moving on to what we're all here for, the agenda today, we're starting the webinar with Andy Mikulewski, our content partner manager, and he will be discussing our content hub and recent updates there. Then we'll move on to a recorded session from Emma Bamford, our product marketing manager, who will be showcasing recent product updates and what else is on the horizon and what else we can be looking forward to. And then lastly, we're joined by Craig Hamill, senior customer success manager, and he'll be discussing exciting changes to our CSM team and what we're working on over the coming months with you all. So over to you, Andy. Take it away.
Thank you, George. Good morning, everybody. It's great to see so many people on this webinar. So I've got a fairly short slot, so a few minutes. And what I thought would be good to begin with was to share a short introduction to myself before going on to show you some developments around content, the newly acquired content partners, and also who we've been speaking to over the last few months about future exciting content partnerships. So I joined Go1 just over a month ago, having previously worked sort of in digital learning for a business school for around 20 years, but also a couple of software as a service companies. And one of the key factors which attracted me to apply to a role at Go1 was about 12 months ago when I was working for my previous organization. They were looking to resell the Go1 content hub to their particular clients. So I had exposure to the content hub and was really sort of impressed by the comprehensiveness of the actual library, the content partners, familiar names I'd seen previously in the last 20 years, but ones which, frustratingly for me, I've been trying to acquire over the last 3 or 4 years without any success all the time. So it's great to see some, really good content providers on there and some excellent content. One of my tasks within this role is to do a lot of content curation. So whilst we all understand that, gaps will occur and going forward because of people's learning requirements, we'll find new gaps, and that's driven by yourselves, obviously. It was quite reassuring to see that on the content hub, I haven't spotted too many gaps. I know they exist, we'll find them in the future, and we'll address that by working effectively and collaboratively with our content partners and the rest of the team at Go1. So that's a short introduction. If you could move to the next slide, George. So this is a question which every one of you should really be asking any sort of provider, including ourselves. And it's around what content has been added recently. So what I've done here is I've picked out a range of themes. So the sort of topics you guys have been asking about, things which are relevant to business at the moment and the needs of people within the business. So if we look at leadership, we've added, some great content around emotional intelligence, self-awareness of leaders, engagement from a couple of decent suppliers or providers. There's obviously more on the site, but that's just a couple there. GDPR, you can see some, key providers there which are listed. They tend to be sort of 30-minute courses, but very well structured, very well produced, and we're really enjoying working with organizations that are mentioned there. Obviously, there's a lot around mental health these days, so more and more courses and resources to help people sort of combat issues they may have with their mental health, or just gain an awareness of the whole area of mental health and well-being. Sales and customer service, again, you can see there's lots of new content coming in there, as well as things like cyber security. So there's a new supplier there I'll talk a little bit in a moment about. And of course, technical areas are quite important to people within business. So lots of videos, lots of resources, lots of good courses around areas such as development, blockchain, machine learning, etc. Next slide, please. So the types of providers who have recently joined or we're currently onboarding. And the one at the top there, it's a massive brand. When I started out in this industry, they were one of our biggest competitors, fantastic brand, great quality. So we've got over 40 courses from Harvard Managed Mentor. It could be coaching, it could be change management. There's great depth in there. They're structured in shorter lessons. They're attached to, classic articles from the Harvard Business Review, but really fantastic content. We are so pleased to get them on board. There are a few restrictions with Harvard Managed Mentor, so we can only offer it to organizations who have less than 5,000 users in terms of the audience. I won't go through all of them on that list, but RQC I'll talk about in a moment. That's around the whole area of financial compliance. And I think this week, SMCR comes into play in terms of regulatory legislation. So that's an important area. Really pleased to get on board organizations like the Resilience Development Company. So they've got a great module around managing stress. There'll be modules to follow. It's based on sort of science-based and evidence-based approach. So when those courses are added to the system, I urge you to take a look at those. And a few others. LearnBox, again, it's on the horizon. It's not just around maths and English skills. It's a great example. In fact, Craig had a concept there. So we're always working internally to sort of find new providers, as well as being guided by clients like yourselves as to what's out there in the market, so we can address those. But they're also going to cover things like leadership and management. Learning Room, sort of that's compliance and GDPR, and Coquerot, French company, good stuff around diversity, creativity, some leadership and management, and obviously there's some content in French there, and a few others. Next slide, please. Just a couple of profiles. So one particular provider I really like is a company called SkillsHub. So they've got about 500 little micro videos. They range in terms of duration between 2 and 15 minutes. They are attached to resources and further exercises. But, if you haven't had a look at them, do go in and find some of the SkillsHub stuff. It's really, really exciting. It's very good. You can see the topic coverage there, pretty comprehensive, and it's CPD accredited. Next slide. And RQC, probably one of our newest acquisitions in terms of provider. So it's all around the area of FCA compliance, 43 courses. I did one the other week, actually, around sort of cyber security. Very well structured, lots of graphics, easy to go through, very good flow. And as you run through the course, which could be anywhere between 30 minutes and 45 minutes, you've got lots of knowledge checks, and there's a test at the end to check your knowledge, which you have to pass. But again, you can see the coverage there, anything from anti-money laundering to anti-bribery, and the SMCR regime as well. And the final slide, I think. So what can you expect to see around the corner? So probably don't need any introduction to the top two there, Coursera and edX. The difficulty with, putting some of the new providers on the hub, sometimes it's quite difficult to give you exact timescales, but we're working on these all the time. Some of them are signed, well, in fact, most of them are signed. It's just a matter of onboarding and getting the content on there. So hopefully you'll see Coursera and edX, hopefully Q2. Other ones on there, Skillers, an organization I've worked with before, really fantastic content, about 300 modules, very well structured, available mainly in English and German, but there's a few other languages in there, such as Turkish and Polish and Spanish. DuPont's another new provider we've got signed. So two approaches there. You've got micro learning courses, so about 50 of those, and 100 more in-depth courses. And if it comes to something like learning a new language, we've signed up Capturator. So Arabic, French, German, Italian, and English. So if you want to learn a language, that's certainly a place to go. And at the bottom there, you've got sort of medical content from a leading organization called Lectorio. So that's all I was going to really go through this morning in the dedicated time. Hope that's been useful.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Andy. I know a lot of the customers that I work with are really excited, particularly around our kind of new our new providers that we're onboarding that have got multi-language options, particularly Skiller. I know kind of German, French, really, really great coverage there. So thanks a lot for that update. Just going to kick off with one of the polls that I mentioned at the start. So we've got the question on the slide at the minute. I'll launch the poll and it should just pop up in your Zoom window for you to vote. I'll leave the poll open for a couple of seconds. So I'm just launching that now. Awesome, we're nearly halfway. We've just hit halfway. 75%, that's great. That's really awesome, guys. I'll end that poll now. Pretty overwhelming response there, actually. So professional development coming out overwhelmingly on top. Just over 80% of people have responded that is their kind of primary business objective for L&D. So I know that Andy will definitely take that on board in terms of providers that we go out and look to work with, and particularly in the kind of content curation side. That's work that myself and Craig as customer success managers can work with you guys on. So we've now got a product update. Unfortunately, Layla, our VP of product, was unable to attend the session, but as I mentioned at the start, we do have a recording from Emma Bamford, our product marketing manager. So I will kick that video off now.
Hi everyone, Emma here, Go1's product marketing manager, to give you an update on recent and upcoming releases in the Go1 platform and Microsoft Teams. We'll be conducting scheduled infrastructure upgrades on Saturday the 3rd of April from 3 p.m. until 8 p.m. AEST. Full service will resume thereafter, and we've done our best to avoid popular times for learning to make sure users are impacted as little as possible. This impacts anyone accessing Go1 Learning content no matter which system they access from. As a user, you won't have access to learning from the Go1 Content Hub, Go1 Platform, or Go1 Public API. During this period, if you attempt to access learning content within your system, you'll encounter a page informing you of the schedule improvement. The reason we're doing this is so that we can more efficiently release improvements and enhancements, resulting in a better experience for you and your users. If you want to keep track, click on status.go1.com to receive real-time updates. And if you've got any further questions, reach out to the support team or your customer success manager for assistance. Now onto the Go1 platform. You can now browse playlists by topic within Search and Explore, meaning you can find and categorize the right playlists much faster. Additionally, to save time for playlist authors when creating, you can now simply delete content without leaving the playlist structure. Let's talk about mandatory training, and more precisely, delivering compliance training in an effective manner within the Go1 platform. Compliance training mitigates risk for every organisation, and we're focusing on support. The purpose of Go1's compliance project is to reduce administrative effort to deliver mandatory training and improve efficiency within the platform so you can focus on more valuable tasks. This project will touch a number of features across the platform to meet our objective. The initial focus is to improve the ability to choose recurring assignation so you can set and forget recurring training and crack on with those tasks. You can see here how this might look, though the end visual may change. You might wonder how this ties into achievements, which was the focus of our last product update. This is still on track for this year. The work we're doing to improve the assignation rules in the platform will form the foundations for achievements as we're addressing your feedback holistically and prioritising from there. If you would like to keep track of this project, we've created a status page that you can refer to at any time for predictable updates. Our focus is based on your feedback, and we rely on it to improve Go1 products so they meet your needs every step of the way. Check out the status page for more information on how to get involved. Over the coming months, we're beetling away to improve the performance of our courses for learners who have a poor internet connection, no matter the system in which they're delivered. This work is behind the scenes and won't be visible to your learners, but it's our commitment to make their experience second to none when accessing learning. This project is due to start in April. One of the pieces of feedback that stood out from our last customer webinar from all of you was how you might find compliance training specific to your region more easily. We want to ensure you feel secure that the content you assign is appropriate for your region in a much simpler way. So we're pleased to say that we're now in a position to bring this filter into the product next quarter. We're in the final stages of working with our content providers to gather and go through the necessary steps to validate this information before adding it as a filter in the platform for all users. Although we don't have an exact release date at this stage, we expect this to be released next quarter. Let's see what's new in Go1 and Microsoft Teams. Familiar features in the Go1 platform are now available in Microsoft Teams. If you have the Go1 Learning app for Teams installed, users can now gain access to My Learning within Teams alongside Explore so they can discover and manage their own content outside of the structured learning within the Teams channels built by team owners. No matter what content your learners are engaging in this personal view, all enrollments and completion data is pulled back centrally into the Go1 platform so you can report on usage with confidence. For many, working remotely has compromised the value of blended learning and instilled additional roadblocks for the connection that comes from learning together. Within Microsoft Teams meetings, organisers can now add learning to the meeting agenda for all attendees to take together. This is now live, so reach out to your customer success manager to learn more. Thank you for listening today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you on what we've shared. As for next steps and keeping the conversation going, we'll be providing a video interview in the coming weeks from our Head of Product and Engineering to answer your questions from today's webinar. Keep up to date with product releases across the board on our website at www.go1.com/blogs. Thank you. Hi, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks, Emma. Feels strange saying that given that she's not here, but really appreciate the input from product to this webinar. Moving on to another poll. We've got the question on the slide at the moment. I will launch it again and leave it open for around a minute or so. So that should all be showing up on your screens now.
I think what would also be great is if once you've completed that poll, if you do have any questions around some of those things that are coming or are available now, particularly around sort of Microsoft Teams and some of those really exciting subjects, then please, please feel free to sort of add those into the chat, because we'd love to sort of be able to discuss those with you at the end of the webinar when we open up the channels for some question and answers.
Great, we've got those votes coming in. Just over 3/4 of people have voted so far, which is amazing. Again, another landslide vote. So Craig, the outcome of this one, number 6, just shy of 60% of people feel like they'd like to kind of discuss improving programs, onboarding, line management training with other people within the community. I don't know, is that something that you've seen from working with customers in your area?
Absolutely. I joined, which I'd be introducing myself in a minute, but I joined sort of back in December, and actually through the customers I've been speaking to, those are some of the things that are definitely on the horizon for talking to, and there's some real sort of good initiatives. I've got sustainability is another one that's really sort of quite a hot topic, psychological safety. So there's lots of stuff at the moment around kind of those company-wide initiatives that are really definitely coming through. So that's really refreshing to kind of understand that that's where our community that are on the call today are sort of behind a similar type of thinking. So yeah, that's great to hear.
Well, there's no point interrupting your flow, Craig. You might as well carry on and introduce yourself and carry on with the CS presentation.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, George. And thanks everybody for joining today and completing the polls. Sometimes people are reluctant to kind of answer, but it really helps us as an organization kind of really drive our products and solution forward. So thank you for doing that. We'll be looking at sort of those responses in some detail after today's webinar. So for those of you who I've not met before, I'm Craig Hamill. I'm a Senior Customer Success Manager who joined Go1 at the back end of 2020, and actually working closely with my colleagues in the CS team, which I'm going to be introducing you to them virtually in a minute, and also our customers over sort of the last few months. It's been really interesting, actually, and I think similar to Andy, I've got some experience in learning and development, so working in learning and development probably spanning around 20 years now. That combined with working with my customers and talking to the CSM team, I'm really excited today to sort of be providing you with some brief insight in terms of how to make learning and development sustainable, particularly focusing on how to achieve best practice in the digital world. So as many topics that are being discussed today, it's a really broad topic, so we're going to be focusing on a specific element. But before I do so, obviously we're talking about being in an ever-changing environment. It's really worthwhile me introducing you to the fantastic CSM team. There are definitely some new faces on there. Before I joined, I think the world of customer success team was George and James, who's our Director of Customer Success, and somebody called Danny, who's now left the business to go on to some exciting new opportunities. This is our new shaped customer success team. So really kind of exciting to be part of this new chapter, not only in my working life, but also working with some great people. So we've obviously got myself on the left-hand side. We've got Emily, who joined us at the beginning of January, who some of you will be working across some of your customer base. We've got George. George is our longest serving employee in the team. So he's got a fantastic wealth of knowledge. So if you ever have the luxury of having George as your customer success manager, then you're very lucky, as you are with all of us. James is currently sort of out of the business for a few months, but when he comes back, it's going to be really exciting because he'll be shaping and driving obviously the department forward. And then we have our newest recruit, which is Jackie, who only joined us just yesterday, actually. And I'm on a call with her this morning, George. I think she said it feels like she's been here for years already.
Which is hopefully a good thing.
Which I think is a good thing. Yeah, I think it's a good thing. It's an exciting sort of place to be. So that's the team in essence. It's really good and important to put a face to a name, and who knows, some of these faces and names may cross your paths in terms of being your customer success manager in the future. So George, if we can, yeah, fantastic. See, with that good a team, he can actually read my mind, which is actually fantastic. Hopefully not too much you can read into my mind, George. So let's start to answer this question then. So how do we achieve best practice in a digital world as HR and L&D professionals? For many organizations, I suppose the realization that we're living in a digital world has now actually become reality. So whether you're an organization who is new to the digital adoption or an organization who is adapting to technology, one thing is actually very apparent, and is that organizations can sort of no longer put digital on the back burner. And I think that definitely working in L&D for many years, it's always been sort of a secondary nature, something that will come and something that will come to next quarter or the quarter after that. So it's definitely now something that's on the agenda. And I think from an organization's perspective, it's no longer purely focusing on actually choosing to transform. It's now about deciding how we transform as L&D and HR department. So that how statement is really, really key in terms of the way forward. And the really good thing is that at Go1, we do strongly believe that digital transformation must focus on addressing or rethinking how, as organizations, we use a powerful combination of technology in the form of our platform, and also the rich content offering, but also the power of our people. So whether that's your customer success managers or our Go1 support team, combined with you, our customers. So why is this so important? Well, fundamentally, it's going to help us drive performance across our organization. So whether that's a compliance thing, whether it's leadership and management, whether it's something that's very much sort of functional or role specific driven, it all comes down to sort of driving business performance. Now, as we know, that as a Go1 community today, we've got people on the webinar and customers on the webinar that are at different stages of that digital journey and different stages of that digital journey, not only with Go1. So some of us have been customers for a while, some of us are very new to working with us. And we firmly believe as an organization that as technology evolves, so should your organization. But I think one thing that I want you to start reflecting on, if possible, is how as learning or HR professionals and leaders of learning, how are we leaning into and driving digital to create and drive that business value, particularly in this new normal. So George, if you can flip the slide for me, that telepathy is switching off now, so hopefully you're still listening to me, which is great. So I wanted to share this slide with you. Now, some of you may or may not know, over the last few months, Go1 has been working in collaboration with some emerging thought leaders. So you may have heard of Laura Overton, Shannon Tipton and Michelle Ockers, and we're working very closely with them, based all over the globe. And in a recent white paper called The New Era for L&D, they spoke with conviction about how the disruption in today's climate has shown that L&D is needed now more than ever. And personally, I think working in L&D for so many years, I think that is definitely true. Now, they reference these four lenses that you see on the screen. So data, technology, community, and experiment. And they are seen as the four lenses that we as L&D and HR professionals should be considering, because these are the things that will sort of really help us as professionals shift that perspective. Hence the question here, how are you exploring and harnessing the opportunities arising from disruption so that we really sort of drive that business value? Now, as I said, we've only sort of got a short amount of time in today's webinar. And as a CSM team, we wanted to really focus on the community lens. We think this is really powerful, and it's all about leveraging the diverse perspectives and skills of others. And in particular, what I wanted to really focus on, or what we wanted to focus on, was the power of community, which is when we seek to build, but not only build, we seek to also strengthen relationship with others whilst building diverse networks. And I think I was reading recently a definition, I think that was that I read from somebody called Julian Stobbs. So some of you may have heard of Julian. A well-respected emergent thought leader as well, who works for CSALT or owns CSALT Learning. And he said that communities are our primary sense-making entities. We use them to discover new information and share knowledge and figure out what on earth is happening in the noisy world around us. And sometimes that is a challenge for us as L&D and HR professionals. We're being pulled from pillar to post, being asked, but we need this, we need that, in terms of from a learning perspective. So how do you kind of streamline that, and how do you make that a priority in terms of delivering the best amount of impact, but also in terms of driving that performance forward? So what I wanted to do was, some of you may have seen this slide before, and I've adapted it slightly. So if you're on board with us as an organization, sometimes we take you through this particular Go1 life cycle. But what I wanted to do was kind of reflect this in terms of that power of community and kind of really relate the two together. if you have seen this before, then the important thing is about the continuous improvement part of this cycle. So these aren't sort of individual stages that you will do and that's it. You go through the 4 stages and job done. For us, this is where continuous improvement is that ongoing cycle, whether you are joining us as a new organization or whether you've already sort of done that sort of initial launch and onboarding. We would recommend that you go through the cycle as many times as possible, depending on obviously the kind of situation. And the reason behind that is that as professionals, we really sort of do need to sort of continuously drive that learning, looking for opportunities to sort of really push adoption of learning, increase engagement, and really sort of gain engagement from different stakeholders across the business. We feel this is really valuable, and we've definitely seen this as customer success managers in the last quarter. And that's where that sort of continuous improvement cycle really does play a key part in what we do and creates that whole ethos of a learning culture. So let's discuss it in a little bit more sort of detail. So let's start off with sort of the business and learner needs. Now, we firmly believe that sort of that early stakeholder engagement is key to not only identifying business and learner needs, but also it's to start creating that sense of a learner community. This has definitely been tried and tested across the customer success team, and definitely with me sort of onboarding to the organization and working with my customers. I've definitely seen that this is starting to sort of gain traction and be sort of a really well worth tried and tested exercise. And this can have many different forms. So this has involved, for example, myself, either supporting you, identify key stakeholders within the organization, or speaking directly to some of those specialism contacts, champions across the business. And what it does is it makes you think about the opportunities to attract, but also identify where learning can make a difference and add real impact across the organization. Often when we onboard customers, there might be a specific thing that we're trying to address, which could be compliance, could be leadership and management. But what we need to be doing is constantly thinking ahead in terms of where we can drive and add value across the entire business. That could be role specific, it could be functional specific, it could be from a strategical perspective. But essentially what we're trying to do is just essentially trying to identify those business and learner needs. So getting a real understanding of the roles and the functional skills and the capability requirements to support learning needs and the challenges across the business can be that start of some real sort of great conversations. And this is where, in our experience, that sort of actively seeking diverse perspective to gain insights can be really, really powerful. Now, if these stakeholders don't exist within your business, this may be an opportunity to consider identifying and creating learning champions across your business. So again, there might be some advocates of learning across the business that you can get involved at a very much an early stage. The sooner you can start talking to other people within the business, the sooner you can start to uncover, analyze, and also sort of diagnose sort of those challenges in which the Go1 solutions can really start to address some of those learner needs. Now, once we've kind of gone through sort of that business and learner needs sort of discovery stage, we're kind of moving then on to sort of alignment and mapping, and reaching out to others within the business can really provide that sense of partnership, partnering with others whose experience and skills really can complement your own, which will eventually and ultimately create some real strong relationships and partnerships. Now, sometimes as professionals, we're expected to know everything. We're expected to understand, you know, the technical world of research and development and the different programming languages, for example, that are often, you know, there's a requirement around specific content. There could be a compliance piece, there could be some management and leadership pieces around understanding the different levels of management and leadership and how we curate that content to really map and drive that within the business. That's a massive challenge for L&D and HR professionals. So one of the recommendations here is about, again, if you can gain and partner with some other who have that experience within the business, what that does is it makes your life a little bit easier. Sometimes there's kind of that sense of feeling there's a bit of an uphill struggle, or we're not quite close enough to the operations and the strategical aims of the business. But what this can do is, in reality, it can enable you to start driving that advocacy in terms of learning across different roles and functions, and starts to create that sense of community and can really sort of help you drive learning in the right direction. With that interaction and those really good, useful conversations, you then start to drive out some of these other things. So with interaction creates curiosity. I know with working with some of the subject matter experts and stakeholders that we've reached out to in my customer base, that actually once people start looking at the content that's available or start understanding the features that are available on the Go1 platform, there's this initial sense of excitement and they want to know that a little bit more. So sometimes there is that initial sort of drive to kind of really push it, but what we're trying to do here is we're trying to change that push-pull dynamic. So people are coming to you from within your business and saying, what else have you got? This is really good. I didn't realize you had this. So it really starts to sort of enter some really interesting sort of conversations. So we start to notice that sort of engagement shift in terms of them wanting more. So there's then that extension of a wider learning community that comes off the back of that. That can often lead to discussions about creation of user-generated content. So we've got some content that we already produced. Can we make that available as part of the Go1 platform? Of course you do. We can wrap that around some of the content that exists, but also we can make this an even improved, better user experience by having your bespoke customized content aligned with ours and mapped to really sort of drive that within the business. So that's a really exciting thing, I think. And in our experience, what that can then do is drive learners to really think about content outside of the norm, content that may even include podcasts, webinars, and other resources. I know both internal and external to our business, we have really sort of driven forward in terms of webinars and podcasts. And that does just create that sense of a learner community, whether it's internal or external to the business. You're pulling in the different knowledge and experiences and you're sharing that across communities. So that's really, really powerful in terms of that wider community. So once we've done that, we kind of move on to launch and implementation. And when I talk about launch and implementation, this can be applied not only if you're initially onboarding as a new Go1 customer, but also where this continuous improvement cycle becomes a platform for some of the elements sort of shown on the slide deck. So the curation and deployment, this is all about sort of getting others involved and creating that sense of hype, but also getting them involved with, is there some user-generated content that we need to start creating? What do we have on the platform, whether it's micro-learning, whether it's a fully fledged course that's really sort of going to help us drive learning across the business? And that will come through some of those previous stages that we've talked about, which is very insightful in terms of how you launch, how you implement. And through that is then the identification of advocates to kind of support what you're doing. But also this is sensed then through talking to more key stakeholders across the business about spotting opportunities where you can really drive learning across your organization. Now, with my customers and some of the other customer success managers, they've been talking as well to their customers about campaigns and initiatives and how we really drive that content. And we gain that momentum and we make it so that it's just not we've implemented a solution and there you go, you're on your way. It's more of a sense of, right, what can we do to real sort of drive learning across the organization? So, for example, in May, there's Learning at Work Week. If you didn't know that existed, it does exist. So that's, again, looking ahead in terms of from a strategical perspective and saying, right, where do we need to closely align some of this content to what actually we're trying to achieve and address as part of some of those business challenges in the organization? And then is Learning at Work Week a really good platform and forum to be able to kind of push and drive that content out? The week prior to that, we've got Mental Health Awareness Week. So I know at the moment we're sort of driving that through with some of our customers. Again, we're looking ahead and looking where our content can really support them in terms of driving that across the business. We even internally and with some of our customers, we have our own book club. So even if it's a World Book Day or you're focusing on a social learning element, but using some of our content around Blinkist for a perfect example is a really good way of sort of driving engagement, driving social learning, but also increasing knowledge and experience across that organization. So getting involved with that and also talking to customers about sort of getting involved with writing blogs. within their business. So how has learning changed people's lives? What does that mean to them? What does some of the content, how has it impacted them? And actually showcasing that across the business, because again, that's driving that engagement through. And then we have things like podcasts, and that's also available. And what that does is that early adoption sort of really helps with their engagement and can almost create that sense of marketing through word of mouth. This is what we're doing on our function. You know, this is the type of impact that we're having. And finally, let's just talk about sort of insight. So by driving engagement and adoption and getting other stakeholders involved, what once may have felt like HR and NLD professionals working in silos or establishing a learning culture being an uphill struggle, all of a sudden that proactive nature of building relationships and partnerships and that sense of community will really help with some of these things. So being able to identify and track learning outcomes generated from the users that are engaged in the learning, the types of insights and feedback that's being gathered, that will help us make some sort of more informed decisions. And so as you're making those informed decisions, you're then sort of going back around this continuous improvement cycle. We then have sort of being able to draw on learners and learnings and the sense and adaptability to change, which again we drive through that continuous cycle. So this is where essentially we want you to understand sort of that customer success partnership that we have with you is all about underpinning this cycle of continuous improvement, and we don't want to just, you know, share with you that sort of initial sort of launch and implementation piece. We want to work with you in collaboration, and that partnership really sort of counts to us. So just want to kind of leave you with 3 questions to consider after this webinar. And this is really about, so how does this translate to you? So ask yourself, will you be able to see challenges differently through the lens of the community, building this community? What will using that power of community actually help you achieve and do? And then how will you consciously engage with your community? So it may be that those relationships don't exist. It may be that you've never considered building and evolving those relationships. So it's just about considering those things. And we truly believe through what we've done, and that's tried and tested with some of our customers, that this will really sort of add value and really kind of then will lean back into the subject of obviously today's webinar, which is, you know, how is that best practice going to help you in terms of the digital world, which is now part of the norm. And that's me. Sorry, George. I think that nicely leads into a poll. I've probably gone over slightly there, but hopefully that's been really insightful to obviously our customers that are on the webinar today.
I think that's great. Yeah, I really appreciate that, Craig. I think the idea of building that community internally within organizations is really important. I think this cycle of continuous improvement is definitely going to be of benefit to our customer base. So yeah, thanks very much for sharing. To bring us home, everyone, we've just got one more poll, which I will share now. That's just been launched and just ties again into the theme of community, I suppose, this time with a more external lens. And just it's something that we're going to work towards throughout 2021 is developing a Go1 customer community. And so the results of this poll are really going to help us drive the direction that we take that community in. It's probably a pretty tricky question. I think you only get 1 vote.
Oh, right. Interesting. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But I would probably sense that, you know, if this makes sense to everybody on the call, if there are things on here that you'd be really kind of excited about or kind of getting involved with. So even on there's kind of like a podcast interview. That's great insight for us as a company, but great insight to share with the wider community and some of the great stuff that you're doing. So there's lots of things on here. So even outside of doing this poll, I would encourage you to get in touch with your customer success manager and kind of say, look, I'd be really interested in terms of being involved with some of these things that you've talked about in terms of actually us being our own L&D community and kind of exploring that and expanding that.
Definitely. I'll put a note in the chat, actually, guys. I hope everyone's seen that, just around how to find our Go1 podcast. So something that we mentioned in our December 2020 webinar was we were going to start developing and kind of running our podcast, and we're well underway in that. Craig's been privileged enough to be invited on the podcast. He's had an episode. He'd love it if you could all listen to that one to boost his ratings. But you can find that on Spotify and all kind of other services by just searching for Go1 Learning. And there are a couple of people that have indicated an interest in a podcast interview, so please do reach out, whoever you are, to your CSMs. We'd be more than happy to put you in touch with Ollie. And again, another interesting result. So over 60% of people have selected attending events and webinars, much like these. So really, really great to get that feedback. And as I said, one of the reasons why we're here again and we'll continue running these is because of the feedback that we get from you guys around the interest in being involved in these kind of events on a more frequent basis. But I think that brings us to the end of the webinar today, guys. So I really appreciate you guys joining. Sorry for going a couple of minutes over time. I don't think there's been that many questions in the chat that haven't been answered, but should you have any, please do reach out to myself, Craig, Emily, whoever your CSM might be, and we'll be more than happy to help and carry on exploring.